As hard as it may seem to wow audiences these days, sufficiently creative filmmakers will always find a way to do something interesting with the medium that makes everyone sit up and pay close attention. There is nothing quite like watching a scene and knowing that an absurd amount of effort went into creating it. We always know when we're watching a scene that hasn't had a director's due attention and basically been lazily phoned in. And we know when a scene has benefited from a determined artist giving everything they've got. So with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with What Culture here with 10 recent movies that put insane effort into scenes. Number 10. All the Illuminati actors were shot separately in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. No matter what you make of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, there's no denying that a clear amount of work went into assembling that unforgettable mid-film Illuminati sequence, featuring cameos from Professor X, Captain Carter, Captain Marvel, Black Bolt, and Reed Richards. Now, originally that sequence was intended to be much smaller before it was expanded into a more fleshed out set piece with reshoots, and due to the actors' availability and COVID-19 restrictions, a lot of the actors largely shot their parts separately. As Black Bolt actor Anson Mount explained, the various cast members shot their parts alone or with stand-ins, with all the footage then being ingeniously stitched together during post-production. He said, "That was a very interesting shoot because my role came up in the reshoots. As you can imagine, several of the actors were quite busy. Patrick Stewart was not there. John Krasinski's contract wasn't even done. He wasn't there. We had actors playing those roles knowing that they were going to either be substituting their shots or transplanting faces. I've never done anything quite like that, and I was in disbelief of how well it cut together." Now that is a lot of effects and editing work compared to just doing it the normal way of having all the actors in one place. But given how tricky the production actually was, which did include several pandemic-related shutdowns, which actually resulted in a Daniel Craig cameo being scrapped, you can't really blame Sam Raimi and Kevin Feige for just going, "We'll figure it out in post-production." Number 9. The visual effects were completed by 5 people from their bedrooms in Everything Everywhere All at Once. To look at Everything Everywhere All at Once, you'd never guess that it was made for just $25 million. The complexity of the visual effects can easily match the style and finesse of films produced with considerably larger budgets. And yet, 80% of the film's visual effects were ultimately down to the collaborative efforts of just 5 artists. The 5 artists, all filmmakers themselves, used off-the-shelf software such as Adobe After Effects to create the film's kaleidoscopic surreal effects. Yet due to the sheer number of shots they needed to complete with so few people and so little money, it required a Herculean effort. And post-production was even further complicated by the pandemic, which required some of these shots to be completed separately in the artist's own home. And ultimately a file sharing system was created so that one artist's work would update across all of the other artists' home computers. Additionally, the team had to deal with unexpectedly complex effects for a small team, such as removing Jamie Lee Curtis from one sequence frame by frame. The fact that the end result is such an astonishing achievement really is a testament to their hard graft, and something that really should be recognised and rewarded in next year's Oscar nominations. Number 8. The Batmobile Chase was mapped out using cutting-edge VR technology in The Batman. The Batman's astonishing Batmobile chase, in which the Dark Knight chases down the Penguin, is one of the most technically impressive set pieces of the year, and one which required a ludicrous amount of prep on director Matt Reeves' part. Now, the majority of the chase was filmed practically, with most of the shots being filmed on an airfield, with some of the background plates that would be composited into the scene being filmed with a car mounted with a special 360-degree camera rig. But arguably, the most fascinating and unexpected aspect of the scene is Reeves' use of VR technology to map out the camera positions and effectively design the scene from the ground up. Reeves said in an interview, "We had scanned in the route and we could play on a kind of loop what the path of the Batmobile was, and I could look at the shots in VR before we ever shot them. And I set all of these shots basically beforehand, and we made this crazy storyboard that was made of screen grabs from VR from the lenses we had found. And so it was an incredibly involved process. In fact, the instantly iconic image of Batman approaching the Penguin's upturned car at the end of the chase was settled upon by toying around with the cutting-edge VR tech. And yet, traditional CGI also played a vital role in the final execution of this scene, being used to just alter the spatial geography of the scene slightly to make it a little bit clearer to audiences by moving the positions of some of the background elements such as cars. Now, given that the Batmobile Chase is arguably the marquee sequence of the film, we would say that all that effort was worth it. Number 7. A quarry in Northern Ireland was painstakingly transformed into an Icelandic volcano in The Northman. Robert Eggers' The Northman is full of eye-popping imagery, and perhaps never more than during its testosterone-fueled final showdown between Amleth and his father's murderer, Fjolnir, which sees the pair fighting naked in the crater of a volcano. Now, rather than just plonking the actors in front of a green screen in a warm and comfortable soundstage, the scene was actually shot in a freezing cold quarry in Northern Ireland, with the production designer going to painstaking lengths to transform the locale into a lava-soaked hellscape. He transformed the quarry by dumping black earth intended to resemble the terrain of a volcano. And as for the lava effects and lighting, well, most of it was achieved in camera using custom-designed LED lights, which by projecting realistic lighting onto the actors made the scene appear more realistic. As it turns out, the biggest visual effect in that scene is actually painting out the thongs worn by the actors and then deploying some CGI smoke to cover where their genitals would have been. As for the fight itself, well, Eggers and the actors spent months choreographing it with the stunt coordinator and the cinematographer ahead of shooting. And the final scene is a fittingly epic conclusion to a mesmerizing movie. And it's definitely well worth all of the effort and tireless work that went into creating it. Number 6. The cameos were a legal nightmare in Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers is a hilarious movie, most memorable for its never-ending conveyor belt of cameos from beloved animated characters. Impressively though, the cameos extended far beyond Disney's own stable, including South Park's Randy Marsh, 2 of the Uncanny Valley cats from 2019's Cats, He-Man and Skeletor, the cast of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, and of course, Ugly Sonic. Unsurprisingly, securing all these cameos was an absolute headache for both the director and especially Disney's legal team, who had to win over each rights holder and convince them that these cameos would be worthwhile. Director Akiva Schaffer said of the process, "The legal department at Disney deserves a big box of chocolates from me and the other makers of this film because they had to spend more time on this. I'd be very curious if they keep track of their hours the way a lawyer has billable hours to see if this movie, over the last 2 years, took more time than all their other movies combined. That would be my guess." A lot of times those lawyers had to do a pitch about the movie to another set of lawyers, to say the Mattel lawyers going, "Okay, here's what we're doing, here's why it's cool, here's why it'd be cool to be involved." And then sometimes they push them over to me and I do a whole presentation, and then even if you get a yes, then there's all these approvals and all these details, like can you use that character in marketing? Basically, the fact that this movie exists with the sheer number of non-Disney cameos is nothing short of a miracle on the part of the army of studio lawyers. Number 5. Michael Bay hired drone racers for all the drone shots in Ambulance. By far the most distinctive aspect of Michael Bay's action at Ambulance is his frequent use of drones to capture the chaotic, mostly in-camera action. Though drones have long been used in Hollywood to capture establishing shots, Bay went further by shoving them into the thick of the action. And because Hollywood drone operators had little experience performing such complex maneuvers, he turned to an unexpected party for help. Bay hired drone racing league pilots 25-year-old Jordan Temkin and 19-year-old Alex Vanover, who wore head-mounted displays to pilot the drones from a first-person perspective. The pilot's high degree of skill allowed Bay to record extremely smooth and close-up footage of the film's prolonged set pieces, the stunning result of which remains the film's aesthetic high point. Number 4. Beam and Raju's first meeting was a creative combination of visual effects and miniatures in RRR. First off, if you haven't seen RRR, then we suggest that you go over to Netflix and watch it. The zeitgeist-grabbing Indian epic kicks off with an unforgettable, bombastic sequence in which heroes Bheem and Raju team up to acrobatically save a boy from the flaming train wreck above him. Now, it is no secret that the scene does employ its fair share of visual effects, but what is surprising is just how much of it was actually filmed in camera on location and melded with digital effects. A visual effects breakdown of the scene reveals that iron car scale miniatures of the train cars were created in Virginia and shipped more than 8,000 miles to Hyderabad in India for shooting. Once the miniature train explosion was shot, the production then moved to the city of Rajahmundry to capture reference footage for the river village environment surrounding the train. The village was then created entirely digitally and combined with both the miniatures and practical wirework stunts from the actors. Back in Denmark, the visual effects team spent months compositing the sequence together, and the final result is undeniably one of the 3-hour extravaganza's standout sequences. Number 3. Rory Kinnear spent 10 days being birthed in cold British weather in Men. Love it or hate it, Alex Garland's Men touts one of the most unforgettable climaxes of the year, or really of any year, when the naked man who's been stalking the main protagonist Harper throughout the film, gives birth to a young boy who also resembles said naked man. This birthing cycle happens an additional 3 times, a grotesque, horrifying ritual which naturally revolted as many as it captivated. Nevertheless, it's certainly an impressive technical achievement, expertly melding first-rate practical effects with digital trickery. Now, actor Rory Kinnear has spoken extensively about how arduous shooting this scene was, having to spend 10 nights in the chilly British spring weather being birthed repeatedly. He said, "It was like a week and a half of night shoots and you're cold and covered in goo, so you knew you might as well commit to it wholeheartedly. They try and warm you up with one of those foil blankets afterwards and you realise it's going to stick to you and various lumps come away with it. Obviously there were models to represent various apertures that I would emerge from, but it certainly felt like I was doing it for real." Well, we appreciate your sacrifice, Rory. Or at least some of us do. Number 2. A custom 6-camera rig was installed in each cockpit in Top Gun Maverick. Top Gun Maverick is an astonishing achievement like no other in recent times, largely because of the gorgeous dogfight action being mostly filmed practically in camera. Director Joseph Kosinski and Oscar-winning cinematographer Claudio Miranda arranged to use a groundbreaking 6-camera rig which was installed in each of the plane's cockpits and would capture the actors from every necessary angle. The cast members didn't fly the planes themselves. That job was afforded to pilots placed in the front seat, with the Navy being paid $11,374 per flight hour. But the actors were kept in charge of flipping the switch which activated all 6 cameras. Typically, production would shoot 2 planes at once, meaning 12 cameras were rolling at one time. But in one day of shooting, an eye-watering 26 cameras were rolling simultaneously. Kosinski said that the technical complexity of the film was such that if they captured 30 seconds of usable footage in a 14-hour day, that was great. Kosinski ended up shooting 813 hours of aerial footage for the 131-minute film. With the crew being limited to shooting for 90 minutes per day, Miranda had to study the weather to try and capture as much aesthetically appealing backlit footage as possible. As for how the actors could perform in such conditions, well, each day started with a 2-hour briefing, which went over all of the action and dialogue and all the way down to things as mundane as the eye lines and the position of the sun. The cast then rehearsed on the ground in an F-18 cockpit, took notes from Kosinski, and then went into the air and shot their material, which the cast and crew largely watched together afterwards. And this was the crew's hard graft for months. But considering the jaw-dropping quality of the visuals and the box office performance of the film to date, it all definitely paid off. Number 1. Every single shot was stitched together to resemble a single take in Carter. Netflix's recently released action thriller Carter is, in a word, insane. Director Byung-gil Jung made the bold decision to shoot the wild action film as though filmed in a single take. Yet given that the movie is constantly on the move between fistfights, car chases, skydives, and a damn helicopter duel, it's little surprise that the joins are anything but seamless. Yet Carter was made for just 30 billion won, around $23 million, which, considering its ambitious, almost never-ending array of action, would be basically impossible by Hollywood standards. Though it's clear to anyone watching that the film does employ a ton of visual effects, it is still nevertheless surprising just how much of the more heightened action still had a considerable practical element. For the ludicrous mid-film skydiving fight, for example, the actors actually jumped out of a plane with a camera crew and filmed the bulk of the sequence in the air, with some post-production embellishments completing the job. Then there's the helicopter showdown at film's end, where helicopters were hoisted up on a crane and drones were used, Michael Bay style, to capture vertiginous shots. Sheer madman energy to even attempt something like this on such a low budget is laudable. If nothing else, it gets an A for effort. And that concludes our list. If you think we missed any, then do let us know in the comments below. And while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also, head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.